There are places in this world where the boundary between what we know and what we cannot explain grows thin as mist over cold water. In the fjords and mountain valleys of Norway, where ancient stone meets rushing water in perpetual collision, you will find such places. These are not the tame streams of cultivated lowlands, but the wild cascades that thunder down from heights where winter never truly releases its grip. Stand at the edge of a Norwegian waterfall on a twilight evening when the forest grows still. Listen past the roar of falling water, past the echo of stone, past even the whisper of wind through pine. If you are fortunate or perhaps cursed with the right kind of hearing, you might detect something else. A melody. Not the random music of, but something deliberate, something crafted with impossible skill. A violin playing notes so pure and haunting that they seem to bend the very air around them. This is not imagination. This is not the trick of tired minds seeking pattern in chaos. For centuries, the people who lived in Norway's most isolated valleys knew this sound. They knew its source. They knew its name. The Fossegrim. In the rich and often terrifying tapestry of Scandinavian folklore, the Fossegrim stands apart as a paradox. He is a spirit of the water, yes, dwelling in the most powerful and isolated waterfalls and rapids. He is supernatural, yes, possessing abilities that mock the limits of human skill. But unlike so many of his kin in the dark waters of the north, the Fossegrim is not primarily a predator. He is a teacher. He is a bargainer. He offers something that humanity has always craved with desperate hunger: mastery. Before we journey deeper into his domain, you must understand the world that created him. Medieval and early modern Norway was a land where survival depended on respect for boundaries you could not always see. The forests were deep and ancient. The waters were cold and treacherous. And in both forest and water, there dwelled things that were neither fully of this world nor entirely separate from it. Water spirits, in particular, held a special place of terror in the Scandinavian imagination. They were not abstractions or gentle sprites. They were entities with will, with hunger, with rules of their own. To the farmers and fishermen who lived alongside Norway's countless rivers, lakes, and coastal waters, these spirits represented the fundamental truth that water gives life and water takes life with equal, terrible ease. The Nuken, perhaps the most infamous of Norwegian water spirits, embodied this duel in its most predatory form. A shapeshifter of lethal beauty, the Nuken could appear as a magnificent white horse, as a handsome man, or as a creature of such alluring music that listeners would wade into deep water to their deaths. The Nuken drowned. This was its purpose, its hunger. But the Fossegrim, though related in the broader family of water spirits, chose a different path. Where the Nuken destroyed, the Fossegrim instructed. Where the Nuken deceived without mercy, the Fossegrim bargained with brutal honesty. This distinction matters. It reveals something profound about how Norwegian culture understood the forces beyond human control. Not all supernatural beings exist to punish or prey. Some exist to test. Some exist to offer pathways to transcendence, if you are willing to pay the price. And the price, as you will learn, is never gentle. Picture now a specific place in Western Norway. Not a location you will find on modern tourist maps, but a cascade that locals speak of with careful respect. The waterfall itself is perhaps 20 meters high, not the tallest in a land famous for its vertical waters. But the volume is tremendous. Thousands of liters per second crash down from a narrow cleft in black stone, creating a perpetual mist that clings to the surrounding pines like cold breath. The pool at the base is deep and dark, its bottom never fully illuminated, even at midsummer noon. The current is fierce where the falling water strikes, then swirls into treacherous eddies that could pull a strong swimmer under in seconds. This is not a place for bathing or fishing. This is not a place where children play. This is a Fossegrim place. On certain nights, those who lived near such waterfalls would hear it. The music. It would begin as the light failed, when the world stood balanced between day and darkness. A single violin, played with such technical perfection that it seemed to mock the very concept of human limitation. The melodies were not always Norwegian folk tunes, though sometimes they were. Often, they were something older, something that predated Christianity, predated even the Viking Age. Songs that belonged to the stone and the water themselves. You might wonder why anyone would approach such a place, knowing what dwelled there. But you must understand the desperation of human ambition. In communities where life was hard and entertainment scarce, musicians held a special status. A skilled fiddler could bring joy to winter gatherings, could earn respect and perhaps even a measure of wealth. But more than that, music represented transcendence. It represented the ability to create beauty in a world often defined by survival. And so, despite the fear, despite the warnings passed from generation to generation, there were always those who came to the waterfalls. They came seeking what the Fossegrim alone could offer. Not mere competence, not simple skill, but mastery of such profound depth that it could only be called supernatural. The ability to play so beautifully that listeners would weep without understanding why. The ability to play so powerfully that, according to the oldest tales, even the trees would sway in rhythm and the rivers themselves would pause to listen. Before we meet the Fossegrim himself in full, understand this. He represents something essential about the relationship between humanity and the forces we cannot control. He is the embodiment of a bargain that appears again and again across cultures and centuries. Power has a price. Knowledge has a cost. And those costs are never paid in mere coin. The waterfall continues its eternal thunder. The mist rises and falls with the wind. And somewhere in that liminal space, where water becomes air, where sound becomes music, where the natural world touches something beyond, the Fossegrim waits. He has always waited. He has always taught. And he will continue to teach until the last waterfall runs dry and the last human hunger for mastery finally dies. But that hunger never dies. And so, neither does he. If you seek what he offers, you need only know where to look, what to bring, and whether you possess the courage to pay what he demands. The path to his domain is open to any who dare walk it. Whether you return unchanged or transformed into something greater and stranger than you were before, depends entirely on the depth of your desire and the strength of your will. Stay with us. Subscribe now, because what comes next will reveal the true face of Norway's strangest teacher. The next chapter will take you into the presence of the Fossegrim himself, and you will understand why those who saw him could never forget what they witnessed. Join us as we pull back the veil on one of folklore's most fascinating bargains between the human and the inhuman. The waterfall calls, and in its depths, something beautiful and terrible is playing a song meant only for those brave enough or foolish enough to listen. To understand the Fossegrim, you must first abandon certain assumptions about what supernatural beings look like. Forget the grotesque demons of medieval imagination. Forget the decaying corpses of ghost stories. Forget even the ethereal translucence of fairy tale spirits. The Fossegrim appears as something far more dangerous than any monster. He appears as beauty itself. Imagine standing at the edge of that waterfall pool we spoke of earlier. The hour is late, perhaps 9 or 10 on a summer evening, when the Norwegian sky never fully darkens, but instead glows with that strange twilight that seems to belong to neither day nor night. The air is cool against your skin, carrying the perpetual mist from the cascade. The roar of falling water fills your ears so completely that you almost miss the other sound, the violin. Then you see him. He sits on a rock at the very edge where the waterfall crashes into the pool. A position that should be impossible. The spray should blind him. The noise should deafen him. The cold should drive him away. But he sits there as naturally as if perched on a sunny meadow, his body relaxed, his attention entirely focused on the instrument cradled beneath his chin. And his appearance steals your breath, not through terror, but through a beauty so perfect it becomes almost painful to witness. The Fossegrim appears as a young man in the prime of youth, perhaps 20 years old by human reckoning, though his true age is measured in centuries or perhaps millennia. His skin is pale, not the pallor of sickness, but the luminous white of someone who has never known the sun, who belongs entirely to the realm of water and shadow. It seems to catch and reflect the dim light in ways that human skin does not, giving him an otherworldly glow that marks him as fundamentally different. His hair is long, falling past his shoulders in thick waves that are perpetually wet. In some accounts, it is described as golden blonde, the color of ripe wheat. In others, it is a rich chestnut brown that appears almost black when soaked with water. But all accounts agree on one detail: it never dries. Even when the Fossegrim moves away from the waterfall itself, his hair remains slick and dripping, as if he carries the essence of his watery domain with him always. His face is beautiful in a way that transcends human handsomeness. The features are perfectly proportioned, the cheekbones high and sharp, the jaw strong, the nose straight. But there is something in the eyes that marks him as other. They are described variously as blue as deep water, as gray as storm clouds, as green as the moss that grows in perpetual shadow. Whatever their color, they possess a depth and knowledge that no mortal gaze could match. These are eyes that have watched centuries pass, that have seen empires rise and fall, that understand secrets the living world has forgotten. And he is naked. This detail matters more than mere titillation. The Fossegrim's nakedness is not sexual, but elemental. He wears no clothes because clothes belong to human civilization, to the world of woven fabric and social convention. He is a being of pure shayusa, of water and stone, and the wild spaces where humanity's rules hold no power. In some tales, he might wear a simple garment around his waist, a concession perhaps to the sensibilities of the humans who seek him out. But even this is minimal, barely present, a gesture rather than genuine covering. His body is that of an athlete or a dancer, lean and perfectly muscled without excessive bulk. Every line speaks of strength and grace. When he moves, it is with a fluid elegance that seems to flow like water itself. He can leap from rock to rock across the rapids with impossible ease, can dive into the deepest pools and emerge minutes later without gasping for breath. The water is not his environment. The water is an extension of his being. But it is the violin that truly defines him. The instrument he plays is sometimes described as a traditional fiddle, sometimes as a more refined violin. Its origins are never explained. Did he craft it himself from wood that grew in places humans never see? Did he steal it from a master luthier centuries ago? The tales do not say. What they do say is that the sound it produces surpasses anything a mortal instrument could create. Watch his hands as he plays. The left hand moves across the fingerboard with speed and precision that blur into impossibility. His fingers dance from note to note without the slightest hesitation, without the smallest error. The right hand draws the bow across the strings with a pressure so perfectly controlled that each note rings with crystalline purity. There is no scratching, no wavering, no imperfection of any kind. The music that emerges is technically flawless and emotionally overwhelming. The melodies he plays are haunting beyond description. They speak of loneliness and longing, of the deep cold of water that has never seen sunlight, of time passing in ways that mortal minds cannot comprehend. They speak of beauty and sorrow intertwined so completely that they become indistinguishable. To hear the Fossegrim play is to understand something fundamental about the perfection, and why perfection always carries an edge of tragedy. Now consider where he dwells. Not all waterfalls are Fossegrim places. Not all rapids hold his presence. He chooses his locations with specific criteria that reveal much about his. He prefers powerful waterfalls, places where the volume and force of water create that perpetual thunder and mist. He prefers isolated locations, far from towns and villages, deep in the wilderness where human presence is rare and tentative. The most potent Fossegrim locations are those where the water has carved deep pools and treacherous currents, where the danger is palpable and immediate. These are not gentle forest streams, but fierce rapids that could dash a man against rocks or pull him under in seconds. The power of the water mirrors the power of the being who inhabits it. The danger of the location reflects the danger inherent in seeking what the Fossegrim offers. In western Norway, particularly in the regions of Hordaland and Sognogfjordane, certain waterfalls were known by reputation as Fossegrim dwelling places. These were marked not by signs or warnings, but by collective knowledge passed down through generations. Young men would be told which cascades to avoid unless they had serious purpose. Mothers would warn their children away from specific pools where the water ran too deep and too dark. The significance of these locations extends beyond mere geography. In Norwegian folklore, certain places exist as thin spots, as we mentioned before, places where the barrier between the mundane world and the realm of spirits grows permeable. Waterfalls, with their constant transformation of water into mist, their endless noise that drowns out ordinary sound, their visual spectacle that mesmerizes the eye, naturally became such liminal spaces. To stand at a Fossegrim waterfall is to stand at a threshold. Behind you lies the world of farms and families, of Christian faith and human law. Before you lies something older and stranger. The Fossegrim himself represents that threshold made flesh. He is beautiful enough to draw you forward, skilled enough to offer what you desperately desire, and alien enough to remind you with every glance that you are negotiating with something that operates by rules you do not fully understand. Some accounts describe multiple Fossegrim, suggesting that the name refers not to a single being, but to a species or type of water spirit. Each major waterfall system might have its own Fossegrim, each one similar in appearance and but distinct in personality and temperament. Others insist there is only one true Fossegrim, a singular entity who moves between different waterfalls according to his own unknowable schedule. This ambiguity is itself revealing. Norwegian folklore was never meant to be systematic theology. It was living tradition. Stories told around winter fires, warnings shared between neighbors, explanations for the unexplainable. The Fossegrim existed in that fluid space between myth and experience, between collective belief and individual encounter. What remains consistent across all accounts is his fundamental: he is beautiful, he is musical, he is tied to powerful water, and he is willing to teach those who approach him correctly. This last quality sets him apart not just from other water spirits, but from most supernatural beings in European folklore. He offers genuine benefit, genuine transformation, if you can meet his terms. The waterfall continues its endless song. The Fossegrim sits in the spray and mist, drawing his bow across strings that sing with inhuman perfection. And somewhere in Norway's wild places, such scenes might still unfold for those with eyes to see and ears to hear. The boundary between worlds remains thin at the water's edge. The beautiful teacher waits in his realm of cold water and colder beauty. In the next chapter, you will learn what he demands: the price, the offering, the specific and strange ritual required to transform yourself from observer to student. What the Fossegrim offers is extraordinary. What he requires in exchange is equally so. Every bargain with the supernatural has its price. This is a truth so fundamental to folklore that it appears across every culture and every century. The Fossegrim is no exception. But his price is specific, ritualized, and strange in ways that reveal the deep logic of Norwegian folk belief. What he demands is not gold, not your firstborn child, not even your soul. He demands something far more particular: a white goat, stolen, on a Thursday night, thrown alive into the water where the Fossegrim dwells. Let us unpack this requirement piece by piece, because each element matters. Each detail carries weight and meaning that extends far beyond the surface. This is not arbitrary supernatural whimsy. This is a ritual coated with layers of significance that the people who created this tradition understood instinctively. First, the goat itself. In agricultural Norway, goats were valuable livestock, providers of milk, meat, and hides. They were hardy animals capable of surviving in terrain too rough for cattle, able to climb steep slopes and subsist on sparse vegetation. A goat represented real economic value to a farming family. To sacrifice a goat meant sacrificing genuine wealth, not symbolic tokens. The Fossegrim demands something that costs you. But not just any goat. A white goat. Color symbolism runs deep in European folklore, and white carries complex meanings. White suggests purity, yes, but also otherness. White animals were considered touched by the supernatural, marked as different from their normal-colored kin. A white goat was already liminal, already partway between the mundane and the magical. It was an appropriate bridge between worlds, an offering that belonged partly to the realm the Fossegrim inhabited. Now consider the requirement that the goat must be stolen. This is crucial. You cannot use your own goat. You cannot purchase a goat at market. You cannot receive a goat as a gift and bring it to the Fossegrim. It must be stolen. This requirement transforms the seeker from mere supplicant into transgressor. You must break human law, violate the boundaries of property and trust, commit a crime against your neighbor. The Fossegrim will not teach someone who arrives with clean hands. Why Thursday? In Norse tradition, Thursday was Thor's day, named for the thunder god who protected humanity from the forces of chaos. It was considered an auspicious day for important undertakings. But Thursday night, the threshold between Thor's day and Friday, Freya's day, held special liminal power. It was a time between times, neither fully one day nor the next. The theft must occur in this in-between space, adding another layer of transgression and liminality to the ritual. The theft itself required skill and courage. Goats are not silent, passive animals. They bleat. They resist. They attract attention. To steal a white goat on a Thursday night meant creeping into a neighbor's property under cover of darkness, subduing the animal without raising alarm, and carrying or leading it away through forest and over rough terrain to the waterfall. This was not a simple task. It was a test in itself, a demonstration of determination and willingness to risk everything for the goal. Now imagine yourself having completed this theft. You have the white goat, perhaps bound or perhaps led by a rope. The animal senses your tension, your fear, your purpose. You make your way through the dark forest toward the waterfall you have chosen. The sound of rushing water grows louder with each step. The air grows colder. The mist begins to touch your face. You are approaching the threshold. You reach the pool. The waterfall thunders before you, white water visible even in darkness. The spray soaks you instantly. You hold the rope attached to the white goat, and the animal pulls against you, instinctively understanding that something terrible is about to occur. This is the moment. This is where determination either holds or breaks. You must throw the goat into the water, not gently lower it, not release it at the edge. Throw it. Hurl it bodily into the pool where the Fossegrim dwells. The violence of this act is deliberate. You are not making a polite request. You are forcing the attention of a supernatural being through a dramatic, brutal offering. The goat will drown or be taken by the Fossegrim. Its life ends in cold water and darkness. This is the price of your ambition. But here is where the ritual becomes even more complex. The quality of the goat determines the quality of the teaching you receive. This is not a simple transaction where any white goat stolen on any Thursday will yield the same result. The Fossegrim judges your offering, and based on that judgment, he calibrates his gift. A perfect offering, a flawless white goat in prime condition, stolen with perfect timing and thrown with perfect conviction, earns you the ultimate teaching. The Fossegrim will teach you to play with such skill that trees will bend and sway to your music. Rivers will pause in their courses to listen. Animals will emerge from the forest to stand transfixed. Humans who hear you play will weep uncontrollably, overwhelmed by beauty they cannot articulate. You will become a musician of literally supernatural ability, someone whose skill transcends human limitation entirely. A good offering, but not perfect, earns you mastery that is merely extraordinary by human standards. You will become the finest fiddler in your region, able to play for hours without tiring, able to learn any tune after hearing it once, able to command any gathering with your music. This is still far beyond normal human skill, but it falls short of the truly miraculous. You will be exceptional, but not legendary. A poor offering, a scraggly goat, or one stolen carelessly or on the wrong night earns you very little. The Fossegrim, insulted by your inadequate sacrifice, will teach you only one thing: how to tune your instrument properly. This is the minimum knowledge, the bare technical foundation of musicianship. You will understand the mechanics, but possess no real art. Your playing will be competent but uninspired, correct but cold. This is punishment disguised as teaching, a reminder that supernatural beings do not tolerate disrespect. Some accounts suggest that an offering so poor or so insulting might earn you nothing at all, or worse, might result in the Fossegrim pulling you into the water to join the drowned goat. The line between inadequate offering and dangerous offense was thin. Those who approached the Fossegrim needed to understand this. Half measures were worse than no attempt at all. Consider what this system reveals about the culture that created it. The Fossegrim legend does not promise something for nothing. It does not suggest that supernatural skill can be earned through mere wishful thinking or prayer. It demands real sacrifice. The economic cost of the goat, the moral cost of theft, the psychological cost of killing an animal with your own hands, the physical cost of the journey and the ritual itself. And it acknowledges gradations of outcome. Not everyone who seeks the Fossegrim receives the same reward. Your commitment, your sacrifice, the quality of your offering, all these things matter. This is a folk tradition rooted in the reality of human inequality, acknowledging that even in supernatural bargains, some receive more than others based on what they bring to the exchange. The ritual also serves a social function. A young man who claimed to have learned from the Fossegrim was implicitly confessing to theft. He was admitting criminal behavior, supernatural contact, and a willingness to traffic with beings outside Christian doctrine. This was not a claim made lightly. It marked you as someone who had crossed boundaries, who operated by rules that mixed the old ways with the new, who possessed knowledge that came at a price others were unwilling to pay. In communities where musical skill could elevate social status, and where the line between natural talent and supernatural gift was uncertain, the Fossegrim legend provided an explanation. It answered the question: how did this person become so skilled? The answer was not mere practice or natural aptitude. The answer was that they had gone to the waterfall, had stolen the white goat, had made the offering, and had paid the price that others would not. The pool continues to swirl beneath the waterfall. The white goat sinks into dark water. And somewhere in that cold depth, the Fossegrim acknowledges the offering and judges its worth. What happens next depends entirely on what you have brought and how desperately you desire what only he can teach. The bargain is made. The price is paid. Now comes the lesson. And that lesson, as you will discover in the next chapter, is not gentle. The Fossegrim does not teach through patient encouragement or gradual skill building. His method is as dramatic and violent as the offering that summoned him. Blood will flow before mastery is achieved. Pain will become the currency of permanent skill. The teaching of the waterfall spirit is not for the weak of will or the faint of heart. The offering has been accepted. The white goat has disappeared into the dark water, claimed by currents or by the Fossegrim himself. You stand at the edge of the pool, soaked by spray, heart hammering in your chest, waiting for what comes next. The waterfall continues its thunder, but beneath that sound, you hear it again. The violin. Then he emerges from the water. The Fossegrim rises from the pool as if the water itself is lifting him, as if gravity holds no claim on his body. Droplets stream from his pale skin and long hair. His eyes fix on you with an intensity that makes you understand, viscerally and completely, that you are no longer in the realm of human interaction. This is not a teacher you can bargain with or flatter. This is not a master who will accept excuses or hesitation. This is a being who operates by his own laws, and you have voluntarily placed yourself under his authority. He does not speak. The Fossegrim rarely speaks in the old tales. His communication is through music and through action. He gestures for you to approach, and despite every survival instinct screaming at you to flee, you move forward. You are already committed. The goat is gone. The boundary has been crossed. There is no returning to who you were before this moment. You have brought your instrument. Perhaps it is a simple fiddle, homemade or inherited from a parent. Perhaps it is a more refined violin, acquired through savings or trade. The quality of the instrument matters less than you might think. The Fossegrim's teaching will transform not just your skill, but your relationship to the instrument itself. What matters now is your hand, your arm, your willingness to endure what comes next. The Fossegrim extends his hand toward you. His fingers are long and elegant, the fingers of an artist, but they possess a strength that is immediately apparent. This is not human strength. This is the strength of water that can carve stone, of currents that can sweep away bridges, of ice that can split mountains. When those fingers close around your right wrist, you feel the cold of deep water and something else. Power. Ancient, inhuman power. He positions your body with absolute precision. Your posture must be exact. Your arm must be angled correctly. Your violin must rest at the perfect position against your shoulder and chin. He adjusts you as if you are an instrument yourself, as if your body is simply another tool to be calibrated. There is no gentleness in this positioning, but neither is there cruelty. There is only the absolute focus of a master who will accept nothing less than perfection. Now comes the lesson. The Fossegrim places his hand over yours, his cold fingers wrapping around your bow hand. His grip is firm, unyielding, absolute. You cannot pull away even if you wanted to. And then, without warning, without preparation, he begins to move your hand across the strings. Fast. Faster than you thought possible. Faster than human muscles should be able to move. The bow flies across the strings in patterns so complex and rapid that your conscious mind cannot track them. Your fingers are forced into positions you did not know existed. Your wrist bends at angles that stretch tendons and ligaments to their limits. The music that emerges is beautiful beyond description, but you barely hear it. All you can feel is the strain, the stress, the beginning of pain. The Fossegrim does not slow down. He does not check to see if you are comfortable or ready. He drives your hand forward through technique after technique, pattern after pattern, movement after movement. Your muscles begin to burn with lactic acid buildup. Your tendons ache. Your joints protest. And still he continues, relentless as the waterfall behind him, unstoppable as the current below. Then you feel the first warm trickle on your fingers. Blood. The constant friction of the bow against your hand, the repeated stress of impossible movements, has worn through your skin. Small wounds open on your fingers where they grip the bow. The blood mixes with the spray from the waterfall, diluting into pink streams that run down your wrist. The pain intensifies from dull ache to sharp, specific agony. You want to stop. Every fiber of your being screams to pull away, to end this torment, to escape back to the safety of the ordinary world. But the Fossegrim's grip does not loosen. His hand continues to guide yours, continues to force the movements, continues to push past the threshold of human endurance. This is the lesson. This is the price beyond the price. This is what mastery costs. The folklore is explicit about this element. The Fossegrim does not stop until your hand bleeds. The blood is not accidental damage or unfortunate side effect. The blood is essential. The pain is essential. They are the mechanism through which supernatural skill becomes permanently embedded in your flesh and bone and nerve. You are not learning through repetition or practice. You are being transformed through ordeal. Consider the logic embedded in this tradition. In Norwegian folk belief, knowledge gained easily was knowledge that could be lost easily. Skills acquired without suffering were shallow, temporary, vulnerable to forgetting. But knowledge written into your body through pain, through blood, through pushing past every limit you thought you had, that knowledge became permanent. It carved itself into your very being. It could never be forgotten or lost because it was no longer merely mental. It was physical, visceral, cellular. The teaching continues. Minutes stretch into what feels like hours. Your hand is now slick with blood and water. Every movement sends fresh waves of pain up your arm. Your muscles tremble with exhaustion. Your breathing comes in ragged gasps. And through it all, the Fossegrim's expression never changes. He is not cruel. He is not sadistic. He is simply doing what he has always done. Teaching, transforming, taking someone who dared to approach him and remaking them into something greater. The music you are producing, even through the pain, even through the blood, is extraordinary. Notes cascade and flow with a complexity and beauty you never imagined possible. Melodies weave through harmonies that seem to exist in dimensions beyond normal sound. Your conscious mind is too overwhelmed by pain to appreciate what is happening, but some deeper part of you recognizes it. This is not human music. This is the music of waterfalls and storms, of ancient forests and deep lakes, of the wild spaces where the supernatural dwells. Finally, after an eternity compressed into a single night, the Fossegrim releases your hand. The sudden absence of his grip is almost as shocking as the initial contact. You stagger backward, clutching your bleeding hand to your chest. Your arm trembles uncontrollably. Your fingers are cramped into positions they may never fully relax from. You are exhausted, traumatized, transformed. The Fossegrim steps back into the water. He does not speak. He does not acknowledge your pain or your endurance. He simply fades back into his element, returning to whatever existence he maintains beneath the surface. The lesson is complete. The transaction is finished. What happens next is entirely up to you. You wrap your hand as best you can with torn fabric from your shirt. The bleeding will stop eventually. The wounds will heal, though they may leave scars. But something has changed at a level far deeper than damaged skin. Your hand remembers. Your arm remembers. Your entire body remembers every movement the Fossegrim forced you through. That memory is now permanent, indelible, supernatural. When you pick up your violin again, days or weeks later, after the physical wounds have healed, you will discover what you have gained. Your fingers will move to positions they never found before. Your bow will flow across strings with a fluidity that shocks you. Melodies that once seemed impossibly complex will emerge from your instrument with ease. You will play for hours without tiring. You will hear the music in your mind and translate it instantly to your hands. You will have become what you sought to become, a master. But you will never forget the price. Every time you play, some part of you will remember that night at the waterfall. The cold water, the beautiful, terrible being who emerged from it. The relentless teaching, the blood mixing with spray, the pain that bought permanent skill. You will carry those memories alongside your mastery, inseparable and eternal. This is what the Fossegrim offers. Not mere technical instruction, but complete transformation, purchased through ordeal. Not gradual improvement, but instant mastery, written in blood and suffering. This is why those who truly learned from the Waterfall spirit were marked forever, changed in ways that went far beyond simple musical ability. They had crossed a threshold, paid a price, and returned carrying something that belonged partly to the other world. The waterfall continues its song. The pool remains cold and dark. And the Fossegrim waits beneath the surface for the next student brave enough or desperate enough to bring him the white goat and offer their hand to his teaching. The method never changes. The price never decreases. The lesson is always the same: pain, blood, and mastery that will last until your final breath. Folklore does not exist in isolation from lived experience. The stories people tell, the legends they preserve and pass down through generations, emerge from the intersection of belief and reality, of mystery and the need for explanation. The Fossegrim legend served a specific and powerful function in Norwegian rural culture. It explained something that otherwise defied explanation: the sudden appearance of musical genius in places where such genius should not exist. Consider the reality of rural Norway in the 18th and 19th centuries. These were isolated communities, separated by mountains and fjords, connected by difficult paths that became impassable in winter. Travel was rare. Outside teachers were virtually non-existent. Musical instruction, when it existed at all, was informal, passed from parent to child or neighbor to neighbor. The opportunities for formal training, for exposure to sophisticated technique, for learning from acknowledged masters, simply did not exist for the vast majority of people. Yet, from these isolated valleys and remote farms, emerged fiddlers whose skills seemed to transcend their circumstances. Young men who had never traveled beyond their local region, who had never studied with famous teachers, who had access only to homemade instruments and the rough folk tunes of their neighbors, would suddenly display technical mastery that stunned everyone who heard them. They could play complex pieces after hearing them once. They could improvise variations that demonstrated deep musical understanding. They could perform for hours without visible fatigue or loss of precision. How do you explain such prodigies? In a world that understood talent as something that must be cultivated through instruction and practice, how do you account for ability that appears fully formed, as if bestowed rather than earned? The Fossegrim legend provided an answer. These musicians had not learned through normal human means. They had gone to the waterfall. They had made the offering. They had endured the teaching. Their skill was supernatural in origin, which explained its supernatural quality. The oral tradition of Norway preserves names and stories of specific fiddlers who were believed to have learned from the Fossegrim. These were not abstract legends, but accounts attached to real people, living memory transformed into folklore. In Telemark, a region particularly rich in both musical tradition and Fossegrim stories, several legendary fiddlers were said to bear the mark of the Waterfall spirit's teaching. One such figure was Mylarguten, born Targjei Algunsson in 1801 in the Telemark region. Mylarguten, whose nickname meant the miller's boy, became perhaps the most famous Norwegian folk musician of the 19th century. His technical skill was considered extraordinary, his ability to command an audience legendary. When he played at gatherings and weddings, people said that even those who did not normally dance found themselves unable to resist the pull of his music. His performances could last through entire nights without degradation of quality or energy. The stories whispered about Mylarguten suggested that his skill had supernatural origins. Local tradition claimed he had sought out a Fossegrim dwelling in a remote waterfall in the Telemark Mountains. Whether he actually made the white goat offering, or whether this was retroactive mythology applied to explain his undeniable genius, the connection was made and repeated. Millarguten played as if taught by something other than human. Therefore, the logic went, he must have been taught by something other than human. Another legendary figure was Håvard Gibbuen, known as Gibleiten, who lived in the same era and region. Gibleiten's playing was described in terms that emphasized its otherworldly quality. Listeners reported feeling overwhelmed by emotion they could not name, experiencing visions or memories triggered by his music, losing track of time while he performed. These effects align perfectly with the supposed results of Fossegrim teaching, where the music transcends mere technical excellence to become something that acts directly on the soul and mind. The stories about these musicians often included specific details that reinforced their connection to the Fossegrim tradition. They were said to practice alone in wild places near water. They exhibited scars on their hands that they would not or could not explain. They sometimes played melodies that no one recognized, tunes that seemed older than memory, that might have been the Fossegrim's own compositions taught during those bloody lessons by the Waterfall. The instrument most strongly associated with both these prodigies and the Fossegrim legend was the Hardanger fiddle, or hardingfele. This unique Norwegian instrument is distinguished from the standard violin by several features. It has 8 or 9 strings instead of 4, with the additional strings running beneath the main strings as sympathetic resonators. The body is often elaborately decorated with intricate paintings and inlays. The sound is richer and more complex than a standard violin, with haunting overtones produced by the sympathetic strings vibrating in response to the played notes. The Hardanger fiddle produces music that already sounds slightly otherworldly, slightly beyond the purely human. The sympathetic strings create echoes and resonances that seem to come from everywhere and nowhere, as if the instrument itself contains hidden spaces where sound can reverberate and transform. When a master plays the hardingfele, the effect is hypnotic, overwhelming, transcendent. It is precisely the kind of sound you would expect to emerge from supernatural teaching. The Fossegrim legend and the Hardanger fiddle tradition became deeply intertwined in Norwegian cultural consciousness. The instrument's unique sound quality seemed to validate the stories of supernatural instruction. If music like this could emerge from these valleys, if melodies this complex and emotionally powerful could be produced by farmers and millers' boys, then perhaps the old stories were not merely stories. Perhaps the Fossegrim truly did dwell in the waterfalls, truly did offer his brutal lessons to those brave enough to seek him. The social function of this mythology extended beyond mere explanation of talent. The Fossegrim legend also served as a kind of warning and aspiration simultaneously. It warned that exceptional skill requires exceptional sacrifice. You cannot achieve mastery without cost. You cannot transcend human limitations without crossing dangerous boundaries. The young musicians of rural Norway grew up hearing these tales, understanding that greatness demanded more than ordinary effort. But the legend also offered hope. It suggested that genius was not exclusively the province of the wealthy who could afford teachers, or the urban elite who had access to cultural centers. A farm boy with nothing but determination and courage could, in theory, achieve mastery equal to any court musician. The path was dangerous and the price was high, but the path existed. The waterfall was there. The Fossegrim was waiting. The possibility remained open. In communities where social mobility was limited and future prospects often predetermined by birth, this was a powerful message. The Fossegrim represented a way out, a means of transformation that operated outside normal social structures. You did not need wealth or connections or family lineage. You needed only the will to seek the waterfall, the courage to make the offering, and the strength to endure the teaching. The tradition also provided a framework for understanding and accepting the sometimes strange behavior of musical prodigies, musicians who seemed odd or antisocial, who preferred isolation to company, who exhibited behaviors that might otherwise mark them as suspect or dangerous, could be understood as marked by their encounter with the Fossegrim. They had crossed a boundary. They had touched something supernatural. Of course, they were different. Of course, they did not quite fit normal social patterns. They carried the waterfall inside them. As the 19th century progressed and Norway underwent rapid modernization, the literal belief in the Fossegrim began to fade. Fewer people claimed direct encounters. Fewer musicians attributed their skill to supernatural teaching. But the legend remained powerful in a different way, as a metaphor for the mysterious process by which talent emerges and develops. Even today, when a Norwegian musician displays seemingly inexplicable skill, particularly on the Hardanger fiddle, the old language resurfaces. They play as if taught by the Fossegrim, as if the waterfall spirit's hand still guides their fingers across the strings. The specific fiddlers who were named as Fossegrim students in oral tradition have largely faded into the general category of folk legend. But the type they represented remains vivid. The rural prodigy, the isolated genius, the player whose skill seems to come from somewhere beyond the merely human. These figures existed. Their music was real. Their impact on Norwegian cultural tradition was profound and lasting. Whether they actually went to waterfalls and made offerings to supernatural beings, or whether the legend attached itself to their exceptional ability as a way of making sense of the inexplicable, the result is the same. The Fossegrim became inseparable from the musical tradition of rural Norway. The waterfall still thunders. The Hardanger fiddle still sings its complex, haunting melodies. And somewhere in the collective memory of Norwegian culture, the beautiful young man with wet hair and supernatural skill still waits in the spray and mist, ready to teach those who dare approach him. The prodigies he created, whether literally or metaphorically, transformed Norwegian music forever. Their legacy continues in every note played by those who carry forward the tradition they helped establish. To truly understand the Fossegrim, you must meet his shadow. In the deep lakes and slow-moving rivers of Norway, in the still ponds that reflect the sky like dark mirrors, there dwells another water spirit. One who shares the Fossegrim's connection to music, his supernatural beauty, his ability to entrance and captivate. But where the Fossegrim teaches, this other being destroys. Where the Fossegrim offers transformation through painful bargain, this creature offers only death disguised as desire. The Nochen, also called the Nick, the neck, or sometimes the Naken in Swedish tradition. He is the Fossegrim's dark twin, his malevolent mirror, the proof that Norwegian folklore understood water as fundamentally dual in life-giving and life-taking, beautiful and deadly, capable of nurturing human culture and capable of ending human life with casual, terrible ease. Like the Fossegrim, the Noken appears as a beautiful young man. Like the Fossegrim, he possesses supernatural musical ability and plays instruments, particularly the violin or the harp, with skill that transcends human limitation. Like the Fossegrim, he dwells in water and is most often encountered at twilight or in darkness when the boundary between worlds grows thin. But these similarities only make the differences more significant, more dangerous, more worthy of careful understanding. The Noken is a shapeshifter. This is his defining characteristic and his primary weapon. He can appear as a handsome man sitting by the water's edge, playing music so beautiful it draws listeners closer, despite all instinct for self-preservation. He can transform into a magnificent white horse, so perfect in form that anyone who sees it feels compelled to mount and ride. He can take the shape of a child crying for help, of an old man who needs assistance, of a lover someone has lost. Whatever form will lure his victim into the water, that is the form he assumes. The Fossegrim, by contrast, never deceives about his. He appears as he is, a beautiful, naked, or minimally clothed young man, clearly supernatural, clearly other. There is no pretense that he is human, no attempt to hide what he represents. When you approach the Fossegrim, you do so knowing exactly what you are dealing with. The transparency is part of the bargain. He offers power, demands payment, and delivers according to terms that are brutal but honest. The Noken offers no such honesty. Every interaction with the Noken is based on deception. The beautiful man is not a man. The white horse is not a horse. The crying child is not a child. These are masks, lures, traps set by something that has only one purpose: to drag victims into deep water and hold them under until they drown. The Noken does not bargain. He does not teach. He does not offer anything of value. He only takes. Consider the typical Noken encounter. A young woman walks near a lake at dusk, perhaps returning home from visiting neighbors, perhaps seeking a moment of solitude. She hears music, a violin playing a melody so achingly beautiful that it seems to speak directly to her deepest longings. She follows the sound to the water's edge, where she sees a young man of extraordinary beauty sitting on a rock, his instrument cradled beneath his chin, his fingers dancing across strings and producing notes that seem to reshape reality itself. He looks up and sees her. He smiles. The smile is warm, inviting, seemingly genuine. He plays a tune she recognizes, perhaps a melody from her childhood, perhaps a song her mother used to sing. He gestures for her to come closer, to sit beside him, to share this moment of beauty and connection. Every instinct screams warning, but the music and his beauty overwhelm rational caution. She steps toward the water. The moment her foot touches the water's surface, he transforms. The beautiful man becomes something else entirely. In some accounts, he reveals his true form, pale as a corpse, with eyes that are empty holes, with fingers that are too long and tipped with black claws. In others, he simply pulls her forward with inhuman strength, dragging her into deep water before she can scream or struggle. The music stops. The beauty vanishes. Only the drowning remains. Or consider the white horse variant. Children or young men see a magnificent stallion grazing near a pond or river. The animal is too perfect, too beautiful to be natural. Its coat gleams like fresh snow, its mane flows like silk. Its eyes seem almost intelligent, almost human. The temptation to touch it, to mount it, to ride such a magnificent creature is overwhelming. The moment someone climbs onto its back, the horse leaps into the water. It swims toward the deepest part. Its rider cannot dismount. They are stuck as if glued to its back. The horse dives beneath the surface, and the rider drowns, still seated on the Noken's back. These stories serve a clear and practical function. They warn children and adults away from dangerous waters. They encode survival wisdom in memorable narrative form. Stay away from deep lakes at twilight. Do not approach strange animals near water. Do not follow beautiful strangers or mysterious music toward rivers and ponds. These warnings might seem obvious, but they are written in the blood of those who ignored them, who underestimated the danger, who died in waters that looked calm and safe, but held currents, depths, and cold that could kill in minutes. The Nøkken represents water as predator, as something that actively hunts human life rather than merely indifferently threatening it. This is crucial to understanding the Norse and Norwegian relationship with water. The ocean, the fjords, the rivers, the countless lakes, all these waters were essential to survival. They provided fish, transportation, trade routes, and boundaries that offered some protection from enemies. But they also killed, constantly. Drowning was a common cause of death. Children fell into streams, fishermen were swept overboard, ships sank in storms, the water gave and the water took. The Fossegrim, in this context, represents a different aspect of waters. He represents water as a source of knowledge and power, as something that can be approached and negotiated with if you understand the rules and pay the price. He acknowledges that water is dangerous, that engaging with it requires sacrifice and courage. But he also affirms that the danger can be navigated, that benefits can be extracted from these perilous encounters. Why does Norwegian folklore need both figures? Because water itself contains both possibilities. Sometimes the danger is arbitrary and lethal, like the Nøkken. Sometimes the danger can be transformed into opportunity through knowledge and courage, like the Fossegrim. A culture that lived so intimately with water needed to acknowledge both truths. Needed stories that reflected both the random drownings and the occasional triumphs. Needed myths that said both stay away, and if you dare approach, here is how. The relationship between the two spirits in the folklore is ambiguous. Are they related? Are they the same type of being with different temperaments? Are they rivals or competitors? The tales do not provide clear answers. What they do establish is the contrast. When a musician is described as having learned from the Fossegrim, there is implied respect, a sense that this person undertook a dangerous quest and survived transformed. When someone is described as having been lured by the Nøkken, there is only tragedy and warning. Interestingly, some traditions hold that the Nøkken can be temporarily tamed or neutralized. Speaking his name aloud breaks his power. Throwing steel or iron into the water forces him to retreat, as iron is traditionally anathema to many supernatural beings in European folklore. Showing a cross or invoking Christian protection can drive him away. But these are defensive measures, ways to escape or avoid him. There is no bargain to be made with the Nøkken, no benefit to be gained. He remains purely threat, purely danger, purely the dark side of water's duel. The Fossegrim, by contrast, cannot be banished or neutralized. He can be approached or avoided, but not controlled or commanded. He exists on his own terms in his waterfalls and rapids. He offers what he offers to those who meet his requirements. He is dangerous, yes, but his danger comes with potential reward. He is a door that can be opened rather than a trap that can only snap shut. In the landscape of Norwegian supernatural beings, this distinction places the Fossegrim in a unique category. He is neither fully benevolent nor fully malevolent. He is transactional, bound by rules that are harsh but consistent. The Nøkken knows no such rules. He is chaos and death wearing beauty as a mask. Together, these two spirits create a complete picture of how traditional Norwegian culture understood the forces beyond human control. Some waters teach, some waters kill. Some offer transformation if you are willing to pay the price in theft, blood, and pain. Some offer only drowning disguised as beauty and song. To survive in a world filled with both, you must learn to distinguish between them. You must recognize when you stand before a threshold that can be crossed, and when you stand before a trap that will only close. The Fossegrim and the Noken between them teach this essential wisdom. The waterfall still thunders with its offer of brutal instruction. The still lake reflects the sky and hides the Noken's hunger beneath its surface. Both are real. Both are dangerous. But only one offers the possibility of emerging transformed rather than drowned. Understanding the difference might save your life, or it might lead you to risk that life for something beyond mere survival. The choice, as always, is yours. By the 19th century, the old stories of Norway's supernatural beings began to take on new life through the lens of Romanticism. What had once been oral traditions, whispered among farmers and fishers, now became material for poets, painters, and composers who sought to rediscover the spirit of the nation. In this new artistic awakening, the Fossegrim stood at the crossroads between art and myth. No longer a local belief, but a symbol of the sublime itself. The Romantic movement in Scandinavia mirrored a wider European shift. Artists turned away from industrialization's gray uniformity and back toward landscapes, folklore, and the untamed beauty of wilderness. For Norwegian creators, the mountains, fjords, and forests were not just scenery, but expressions of identity. The Fossegrim embodied this perfectly. He was the music of given flesh, the sound of rushing water transformed into human form and perfection. Painters captured him standing among waterfalls, surrounded by cascading spray, his hair glowing like liquid light, his violin held as if it were an extension of the landscape itself. In these works, he was no longer frightening or morally ambiguous. He had become a romantic ideal. The artist as spirit, the embodiment of divine inspiration drawn directly from. His beauty was celebrated, his isolation romanticized, his supernatural mastery presented as something to be revered rather than feared. This transformation reflected deep cultural change. As Norway sought independence and cultural distinction during the century, folklore became a wellspring of national identity. The Fossegrim, as a distinct Norwegian spirit with local roots and neutral morality, became a perfect symbol for this new self-image. He was Nordic rather than classical, wild rather than refined, emotional rather than rational. He belonged to Norway's rocks, rivers, and valleys, not to foreign mythological pantheons. Writers reimagined the Fossegrim as muse rather than monster. Poets described him as the quiet voice of inspiration whispering through waterfalls. His violent teaching methods softened into metaphor. The pain of creative struggle, the sacrifice of body and soul demanded by great art. The image of the bleeding hand became the romantic artist's condition. True creation required suffering. True transcendence came only through cost. Composers played their part in this reimagining. Norwegian music of the period began weaving folk elements into formal compositions. The mysterious resonance of the Hardanger fiddle, with its haunting overtones, became the sonic embodiment of the Fossegrim's gift. When composers wrote pieces that evoked mountain streams, echoes, and the shimmer of light on water, they invoked his presence even without naming him. The spirit of the waterfall became an invisible collaborator, a haunting influence running through every note. In this romantic revival, the Fossegrim was often paired in contrast to the Noken, who remained a symbol of danger and descent into madness. The Noken's song pulled victims downward into death, but the Fossegrim's melody lifted listeners upward into revelation. Together, they represented the artist's choice between inspiration and destruction. creation, and despair. This duality fascinated 19th century thinkers who saw art itself as a pact with forces beyond rational control. What made the Fossegrim particularly resonant in this era was the way his tale combined beauty, danger, and moral ambiguity. He was neither wholly good nor wholly evil. He offered greatness but demanded pain. He did not fit cleanly into the model of a Christian angel or demon. This ambiguity appealed to romantic artists who distrusted simple morality. The Fossegrim was natural law in human form, a being whose ethics were those of water and weather, indifferent, majestic, unstoppable. Poets described him as the eternal student of who had learned from waterfalls since the dawn of time. They imagined his music as containing the secrets of the world, wisdom older than language, expressed through tone and rhythm. To these writers, the Fossegrim was not merely a folklore curiosity, but a metaphor for artistic genius itself, born of solitude, shaped by elemental forces, and forever at risk of madness through excess inspiration. In this period, visual art redefined him as well. The romantic painters of Scandinavia portrayed the Fossegrim in scenes drenched with symbolism. He often appeared surrounded by lush vegetation or framed by torrents of water, rendered in meticulous, almost reverent detail. The landscapes around him became stages on which divine beauty revealed itself to mortal eyes. In some depictions, woodland animals or even nymphs gathered silently to listen, representing his acknowledgement of its own voice echoing back through the Fossegrim's playing. Others portrayed him as utterly alone, surrounded only by rock and water, emphasizing his isolation as the price of genius. These images resonated strongly in a time when artists increasingly saw themselves as outsiders, mediators between civilization and wilderness. The Fossegrim became their mirror, a symbol of both their alienation and their transcendence. The romantic fascination with folklore also served political ends. Norway's growing independence movement used native myths to define an identity distinct from the larger powers surrounding it. The Fossegrim, who belonged to no church, no court, no city, embodied pure Norwegian independence. He was self-contained, tied only to his environment, guided by his own laws. His mastery of music connected the spiritual and the national, suggesting that Norway's essence could be found not in imported traditions, but in its waterfalls and forests. Even as belief in the literal existence of the Fossegrim waned, his symbolic power deepened. He ceased to be a figure of superstition and became a philosophical one. Writers began treating him as the incarnation of artistic necessity, the eternal reminder that beauty requires sacrifice, that creativity demands surrender to forces larger than oneself. In this way, the blood of his students reappeared as the metaphorical suffering of artists throughout time. Painters like those of the National Romantic School elevated this symbolism to near religious status. They painted the Fossegrim not as a mythic creature, but as a divine presence woven into the landscape itself. His form might be glimpsed in mist, in reflected light, or in the flowing motion of the water. He was omnipresent but elusive, suggesting that art and the supernatural were not separate categories, but facets of one timeless continuum. In literature, the Romantic poet might describe a young musician driven to madness by the sound of the waterfall at night, convinced the Fossegrim calls to him. The story ends ambiguously. Perhaps he learns divine skill, perhaps he drowns seeking it. The moral is not one of condemnation, but of inevitability. Art consumes those who pursue it fully. The Fossegrim's lesson repeats as an eternal archetype. Creation purchased with pain, beauty wrested from danger. This romantic reinterpretation also reflected the age's fascination with the boundary between genius and madness. The Fossegrim stood precisely on that line. He represented the inspiration that elevates and the obsession that destroys. His students risked their humanity in exchange for greatness. For 19th century audiences, this was not merely supernatural metaphor, but psychological truth. Every artist was a kind of student of the Fossegrim, reaching for mastery that could burn as easily as it could illuminate. The visual arts, literature, and musical compositions of the period together created a version of the Fossegrim that continues to influence how he is perceived even today. When modern readers encounter him in stories or songs, they are seeing through the lens of that 19th century transformation. The dangerous rural spirit of superstition became the archetypal muse of high culture. The wilderness teacher of forbidden skill became a symbol of eternal inspiration and the human cost of genius. By the close of the Romantic era, the Fossegrim had become both an aesthetic and national icon. His image embodied the dream of harmony with balanced by the awareness of its power and indifference. He remained beautiful and remote, forever playing his impossible melodies in places humans could approach only at risk to themselves. In him, Romantic Norway found both its voice and its mirror. And yet, beneath the elegance of paintings and poems, something wild still lingered. The old danger never fully disappeared. Those who gazed too long into the waterfall or listened too closely to its music still felt that ancient pull toward depths they could not name. The Fossegrim's transformation into cultural symbol did not tame him completely. It only gave him a new language through which to speak. Art itself had become his new waterfall, and artists his eternal students. Throughout this journey, the Fossegrim has appeared in many guises: teacher, spirit, muse, and danger, each reflecting a different face of humanity's relationship with the natural and the supernatural. To conclude his story, we must see him not only as a character from myth, but as a bridge, a link between worlds that seem separate but are, in truth, parts of one vast continuum. He belongs equally to water, music, and memory, moving between them with a grace that reveals something essential about our own longing for mastery and connection. The Fossegrim's myth survives not because it terrifies, but because it resonates. His narrative binds together themes that are universal: the desire for excellence, the willingness to suffer for knowledge, the recognition that itself can be both cruel and generous. In him, Norway's untamed landscapes find a voice. The roar of waterfalls becomes an allegory for the human spirit, restless, hungry, and always reaching beyond its limits. In one sense, the Fossegrim is a cultural artifact. He arose from the lives of people who lived in constant dialogue with water, wind, and danger. Their stories gave shape to forces that could not be tamed or fully understood. But in another sense, he remains timeless, because his lesson never loses relevance. Every age creates its own version of the Fossegrim, a symbol of what it costs to touch the transcendent. The Fossegrim stands where the visible world meets the invisible. His waterfall home is not incidental. It is both boundary and passage, a place where substance dissolves into mist, where sound becomes meaning, where one reality flows into another. The humans who approach him stand at that same boundary. To cross it, they must give up something of themselves, whether a stolen goat, their blood, or their unquestioned certainty about what lies beyond the surface. He represents, more than any other being in Norwegian folklore, the principle of exchange between realms. Nothing flows one way. The human who takes from the supernatural world must offer something in return. The Fossegrim teaches this through ritual, through pain, through the strict symmetry of his bargains. It is no coincidence that his lessons are about music, the art most intimately tied to balance, rhythm, and reciprocity. Music itself is a form of crossing. It moves between the physical vibration of sound waves and the intangible resonance of emotion. It belongs neither wholly to the body nor wholly to the soul. The Fossegrim, as master of this art, becomes its living embodiment. He shows that creation lies in the in-between spaces, in the same liminal territory that humans fear yet cannot resist entering. His mythology, though specific to Norway, speaks to something larger. Humankind's eternal pursuit of harmony with the forces of the natural world. This harmony is never gentle or easy. It demands humility and surrender, perhaps even a kind of wound. To hear the Fossegrim's music is to be reminded that beauty is not comfort. It is confrontation. It is an encounter with what is greater than ourselves. Folklore thrives because it reveals moral truths disguised as stories. The Fossegrim's lesson is not a warning in the moralistic sense. It is an acknowledgement of a law older than moral codes. Knowledge always exacts a cost. Inspiration carries pain within it. To learn deeply, one must bleed metaphorically or literally. That truth, harsh and simple, has echoed through every culture, every era, every field of human endeavor. When the Fossegrim takes a student's hand and drives it across the strings until it bleeds, he performs more than instruction. He initiates transformation. Pain becomes a language through which understanding is written into the flesh. This mirrors the human condition itself. Growth through suffering, creation through loss, art forged through struggle. The magic is only a dramatization of what every artist, every seeker of knowledge, must experience in a less literal form. Seen from this perspective, the Fossegrim occupies a moral middle ground. He does not seduce like the Noken, nor does he destroy indiscriminately. He demands and he delivers. He plays by laws that are harsh but never unjust. In a time when many myths portrayed the supernatural as purely malignant or benevolent, he stood as a rare figure of equilibrium. His existence challenges the simplistic division between good and evil. Instead, he reveals the necessity of both danger and discipline in the pursuit of transcendence. Water, his element, reflects this duality perfectly. It creates life and takes it. It cleanses, but can also drown. It mirrors the sky, but hides endless depth. In every droplet of a waterfall lies the paradox that defines the Fossegrim. Beauty and power inseparable, creation and destruction intertwined. Humanity's fascination with water has always been bound to these contradictions. The Fossegrim is that fascination given voice and melody. As legends evolve, they adapt to the anxieties and aspirations of each generation. The Fossegrim that rural farmers once feared became, for romantic artists, a muse. For modern audiences, he becomes metaphor again, this time for the human relationship with creativity, technology, and itself. We still pursue mastery, though our instruments have changed. The waterfall has become the endless stream of information and sound we live within. Yet the desire to find meaning, to reach beyond the noise and hear the deeper music, remains unchanged. If the Fossegrim were to return today, perhaps he would not dwell in mountain rapids, but in data streams or symphonies of digital sound. He would still demand offering, though the sacrifice might no longer be a goat, but time, attention, and the courage to endure the discomfort of creation. The form changes, the principle endures. Mastery belongs only to those who give something irreplaceable of themselves. His enduring power lies in this adaptability. The Fossegrim remains relevant because he personifies the universal human tension between control and surrender. The artist, the scientist, the spiritual seeker all face the same dilemma. How much of oneself must be lost to gain understanding? When does the teacher become the test? Where does inspiration turn into obsession? The myth does not answer these questions. It keeps them alive, vibrating like an unresolved chord. The romantic artists who painted the Fossegrim understood this ambiguity better than any theologian. They placed him in landscapes that were cold, vast, and indifferent. Yet within that indifference gleamed transcendence. The viewer was drawn to recognize the fragility of human effort against the immensity of the Fossegrim, seated amid that grandeur, playing his eternal music, symbolized both its indifference and its generosity. His tune did not care whether anyone listened, and yet it was profoundly generous to those who did. To hear his music in imagination is to experience humility. It reminds us that we are small, that beauty emerges from forces that do not require us, yet somehow include us. In this, the Fossegrim becomes a spiritual teacher beyond his folklore origins. His silence, his unspoken lessons, his refusal to bargain on human terms, all guide us toward an awareness larger than knowledge, the understanding that true wisdom can be received but not possessed. What then does the Fossegrim ultimately represent? He is the mediator between human ambition and cosmic indifference, between the need to shape the world and the reality that the world cannot be shaped without cost. His role as teacher expresses humanity's eternal dialogue with creation itself. Whether through violin strings, paintbrushes, or words, we are all trying to learn from forces we can never fully understand. In Norwegian culture, his legacy endures not only in folklore, but in the character of the people who inherited those mountains and rivers. The same respect for his power, the same awareness of its dual gifts and dangers, remains embedded in national memory. To live among waterfalls is to internalize their lesson. Beauty requires risk, sound implies silence, and mastery demands humility. Perhaps that is the Fossegrim's final wisdom. To be human is to stand at the water's edge, listening, to feel the pull of sound and mist and mystery, to step forward, knowing the water is cold and the current strong, to trade comfort for transformation. His myth endures because it describes what every life, every act of creation, and every moment of courage truly requires: the willingness to cross the line between what we are and what we might become. So when you hear the rush of water in some distant valley, remember that the old teacher still plays. His bow moves across strings unseen, shaping the music of falling water into lessons for those who are listening. You will not see him clearly, for he belongs to the shimmer between worlds. But if somewhere deep within yourself you feel both awe and ache, then his music has reached you. And in that moment, you will know what it means to stand before the bridge between worlds and to hear, for just a heartbeat, its song.